You've been told a lie about World War II. The story goes that American GIs, armed with superior courage and a few wonder weapons, stormed the beaches of Normandy and took the fight to a technologically superior German army. It's a great story, but it's not the real one. The real reason America's arsenal was unstoppable had nothing to do with a single super tank or a revolutionary rifle. It was about something the Axis powers fundamentally misunderstood. It was about math. In 1944, at the peak of its war effort, Nazi Germany produced about 27,000 combat aircraft. In that same year, a single American factory, Ford's Willow Run, built one B-24 Liberator bomber every single hour. The war wasn't won on the battlefield. It was won in the factory by an enemy Germany couldn't see and could never, ever match.
Military history buffs love to debate this. They'll point to the German Tiger tank, a masterpiece of engineering, a steel predator that could kill an American Sherman from a mile away. They'll talk about the Japanese Zero, a fighter so agile it dominated the skies in the early Pacific War. And they're right. On a one-to-one basis, these machines were often superior. But warfare isn't a duel. It's a meat grinder. And the belief that a perfect weapon can win a war is a dangerous fantasy. Germany built just under 1,400 Tiger I tanks in the entire war. America built nearly 50,000 Shermans. The question wasn't whether one Tiger could beat one Sherman. The real question was, could one Tiger beat the 5 Shermans that showed up to the fight and the 10 more that would be there next week if it managed to win? This is where the true story begins. The story of how quantity has a quality all its own.
The answer lies not on the battlefields of Europe, but in the heartland of a nation that, just a few years earlier, was considered a third-rate military power. A nation that had to use wooden sticks for machine guns during training. To understand how this transformation happened, we have to go back to the beginning. And if you want to uncover the hidden forces that shape modern history and warfare, you might want to hit that subscribe button. This is a story you haven't heard told this way.
It's almost impossible to believe now, but in 1939, as Germany's panzers sliced through Poland, the United States military was a joke. It ranked 17th in the world, somewhere between Portugal and Bulgaria. The army was smaller than Belgium's, with fewer than 200,000 active-duty soldiers. They were training with equipment from the First World War. In the Louisiana maneuvers of 1941, entire divisions were equipped with trucks borrowed from local businesses, with signs that read "Tank" crudely painted on the side. The Air Corps was flying planes that would have been shot out of the sky in minutes over a real European battlefield. The country was deeply isolationist, wounded by the Great Depression and disillusioned by the last Great War. The Atlantic and Pacific Oceans felt like insurmountable walls that would keep the world's problems at bay. While Germany had spent a decade rearming in defiance of treaties, America had been sleeping. It was a slumbering industrial power with no will to fight and an arsenal fit for a museum. Everything changed with a single speech. In December 1940, with Britain standing alone against the Nazi onslaught, President Franklin F.D. Roosevelt went on the radio. He told the American people they could no longer pretend this wasn't their fight. He declared, "We must be the great arsenal of democracy." It was a powerful phrase, but what came next was considered madness by many. Roosevelt called on industry to produce 50,000 airplanes a year. To put that in perspective, the entire country had produced just 3,000 planes the year before. Military leaders and industrialists were stunned. They thought he was delusional. The head of the Army Air Corps, Hap Arnold, reportedly said, "The man is crazy." William Knudsen, the head of General Motors, who was brought in to lead the production effort, privately told a senator it was impossible. But it wasn't a suggestion, it was a challenge. And it was a signal to the world that the sleeping giant was beginning to stir, even if its own leaders didn't quite believe it was possible.
How do you turn a nation of consumers into a nation of producers for war? First, you stop making things for consumers entirely. In February 1942, the last civilian automobile rolled off an American assembly line. For the next 3.5 years, not a single new car would be sold to the public. The government established the War Production Board, giving it immense power to direct the entire economy. It wasn't about what the market wanted, it was about what the war needed. Companies that made vacuum cleaners were ordered to make bomb parts. A toy train manufacturer started producing compasses for warships. The Singer Sewing Machine Company retooled to make .45 caliber pistols. It was a total conversion of the nation's economic soul, orchestrated from Washington. The goal was no longer profit or consumer comfort. The only goal was victory, and the price was irrelevant. The American consumer, for the first time in a generation, was told to wait.
The auto industry was the heart of it all. General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, they didn't just build cars. They had perfected the art of the assembly line, a system of production that was the envy of the world. Within months of Pearl Harbor, these giants were given their marching orders. General Motors, the largest corporation in the world, became the single largest military contractor in history. They took on tanks, aircraft engines, cannons, and machine guns. Ford, despite its founder's pacifism, would build the iconic B-24 bomber. But perhaps the most incredible story was Chrysler. They were tasked with building the M4 Sherman tank. They sent engineers to study the existing process and came back horrified by its inefficiency. They proposed building a brand new factory, the Detroit Arsenal Tank Plant, and applying automotive mass production techniques. They promised to build tanks faster and cheaper than anyone thought possible. The Army's old guard was skeptical, but the results were staggering. The company that made Plymouths and DeSotos became a legend for its work on the Sherman, churning out thousands of them with relentless efficiency.
If you want one symbol of this transformation, look no further than Willow Run. Before the war, it was a field in Michigan. Henry Ford was convinced by the government to build bombers. But Ford didn't want to just build planes. He wanted to build them like he built cars. He constructed a factory that was, at the time, the largest building in the world under a single roof. The assembly line was a mile long, with a 90-degree turn to fit it on the property. The plan was audacious. Take raw aluminum in one end and have a finished B-24 Liberator bomber roll out the other, ready to fly. The early days were a disaster. Building a complex aircraft with 30,000 parts wasn't like building a Model T. The tolerances were tighter, the systems more complex. Ford's engineers clashed with aviation experts. The project fell months behind schedule. It was ridiculed in the press as, "Will it run?" But they solved the problems. They broke down the process into thousands of simple, repeatable steps.
By 1944, the factory was a well-oiled machine, producing a 4-engine heavy bomber every 59 minutes. It churned out more bombers than all of Germany combined. But there's a side to the Willow Run story that often gets overlooked. To staff this massive factory, Ford needed over 40,000 workers. They came from all over the country, particularly from the rural South, drawn by the promise of high wages. The problem was, there was nowhere for them to live. A massive, chaotic settlement of trailers, dormitories, and temporary housing sprung up around the plant. It was a place of social friction, inadequate sanitation, and constant strain. Workers, many of whom had never seen a factory before, had to adapt to the grueling, repetitive nature of the assembly line. The sheer scale of the operation created a city overnight with all the problems of a city, but none of the infrastructure. The miracle of production at Willow Run was built on the backs of tens of thousands of ordinary people who endured immense hardship, dislocation, and difficult conditions, all in the name of building the planes that would help win the war. It was a testament not just to industrial design, but to human resilience. Not all of America's war-winning weapons were complex. In fact, one of the most important was a flat-bottomed boat made of plywood, designed by a hard-drinking, foul-mouthed boat builder from New Orleans named Andrew Higgins. Before Higgins, the Navy's landing craft were terrible. They were designed by bureaucrats in Washington and required docks and piers, which meant every invasion was predictable. Higgins, who built boats for trappers and oil drillers in the Louisiana swamps, knew what was needed. He designed a boat that could run right up onto a beach, drop a ramp, disgorge 36 men, and then, thanks to a cleverly protected propeller, back away to get more. The Navy's Bureau of Ships initially rejected his design, favoring their own. Higgins was furious. He used his political connections to get his boat in front of the right people, and its superiority was undeniable. Dwight D. Eisenhower himself said, "Andrew Higgins is the man who won the war for us." Without his LCVPs, the entire strategy of amphibious assault from North Africa to Normandy to Iwo Jima would have been impossible.
The Atlantic was a graveyard. German U-boats were sinking Allied cargo ships faster than they could be built, threatening to starve Britain into submission. In early 1941, the situation was dire. The answer came from another industrialist who had never built a ship before, Henry J. Kaiser. His background was in building massive public works projects like the Hoover Dam. He looked at traditional shipbuilding, a slow, custom-craft process where a ship was built piece by piece on the slipway, and saw a massive inefficiency. He decided to build ships like they were cars. He applied the principles of mass production on a scale never before imagined. His critics in the established shipbuilding industry called his ships ugly ducklings or Kaiser's coffins, claiming they would break in half in the rough Atlantic. The first one took 244 days to build. It was a learning process. But Kaiser was relentless.
Serious, authoritative, and narrative. Kaiser's secret was prefabrication and welding. Instead of riveting plates one by one to a frame, his shipyards built massive 250-ton sections in workshops. The hull, the deckhouse, the engine room, all were built simultaneously. He brought in experts to simplify the design, reducing the number of parts and eliminating curves wherever possible. He championed welding over riveting, which was faster and used less steel. This required training a massive new workforce, including thousands of women who became highly skilled welders. The pre-built sections were then carried by enormous cranes to the slipway and welded together like a giant puzzle. This modular approach slashed construction time. Within a year, his yards were completing a ship in 42 days. They even built one, the SS Robert E. Peary, from keel laying to launch in an unbelievable 4 days and 15 hours as a publicity stunt. They built over 2,700 of these Liberty ships. They weren't pretty, but they were good enough. They were the bridge of ships that carried the arsenal to the front lines.
Machines don't run themselves. The arsenal required an army of workers, an army larger than the one being sent overseas. With 16 million men in uniform, where would this workforce come from? It came from women. The Rosie the Riveter campaign wasn't just propaganda, it was a social revolution. Before the war, the idea of women doing heavy industrial work was unthinkable for most, but necessity obliterated tradition. 6 million women entered the workforce, many for the first time, taking on physically demanding jobs that had always been considered men's work. They became welders, riveters, mechanics, and crane operators. They built the planes, the ships, and the tanks. This influx changed the social fabric of the nation. It challenged traditional gender roles and gave millions of women a newfound sense of economic independence and capability. While many were pushed out of these jobs when the men returned, the door had been opened, and the world would never look quite the same.
The workforce also came from a massive internal migration. Lured by the promise of factory jobs and an escape from the oppressive Jim Crow laws of the South, over 1.5 million African Americans moved to industrial cities in the North and West. This second Great Migration was one of the most significant demographic shifts in American history. It was a journey of hope, but also one of immense difficulty. These migrants often faced housing shortages, discrimination, and racial tension in their new homes. Race riots broke out in several cities, most notably Detroit in 1943. Despite these obstacles, they became a vital part of the industrial engine. They took on some of the toughest and most dangerous jobs in the foundries, shipyards, and factories. Their collective effort was indispensable to the war machine, and in the process, they reshaped the cultural and political landscape of urban America for generations to come.
The German approach to engineering was perfection. They built complex, over-engineered machines that were brilliant when they worked, but nightmares to maintain. The American approach was different. It was the gospel of good enough. The M4 Sherman tank is the perfect example. It was undergunned and under-armored compared to the German Panthers and Tigers. GIs grimly joked that its nickname, Tommy Cooker, was well-earned. But it was mechanically reliable. It shared many parts with trucks, making it easy to fix. Its entire engine could be replaced in the field in a few hours. A damaged German tank often had to be sent all the way back to a factory in Germany. A damaged Sherman was often back in the fight the next day. This philosophy applied to everything. The M1 Garand rifle could be stripped and cleaned by any soldier. The Jeep was a masterpiece of rugged simplicity. This standardization meant that America could not only produce more, but it could keep more of its equipment fighting. Quantity has a quality all its own, especially when you can repair it with a wrench and some spare parts.
Building the weapons was only half the battle. Getting them to the front was the other.
After the D-Day landings, as Patton's Third Army raced across France, it threatened to outrun its own supply lines. The solution was one of the greatest logistical feats in history: the Red Ball Express. It was a massive, one-way loop of roads in France, reserved exclusively for military supply trucks. For 82 consecutive days, it ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The drivers, nearly 75% of whom were African-American soldiers, pushed their trucks and themselves to the breaking point. They were ordered to maintain a speed of 35 miles per hour, day and night, in blackout conditions, often under the threat of enemy fire or air attack. They delivered over 400,000 tons of supplies, fuel, ammunition, food, and medicine. It was the lifeblood of the Allied advance. This was America's industrial might made mobile. It wasn't just about having more tanks. It was about having the fuel to run them and the shells to fire from them, delivered right to the front, day after day, without fail.
While the factories churned out brute force, another, quieter arsenal was being developed in laboratories. Roosevelt created the Office of Scientific Research and Development, uniting the country's greatest scientific minds under the leadership of Vannevar Bush. Their work created force multipliers, technologies that made every bomb, ship, and soldier more effective. They perfected radar, turning it from a clumsy experiment into a war-winning tool that could detect enemy fleets and bomber streams. They developed the proximity fuse, a tiny radar in the tip of an artillery shell that allowed it to explode at the perfect moment. This one invention was arguably as important as the atomic bomb in its impact on conventional warfare, devastating aircraft formations and ground troops. It was the Allied answer to the V-1 flying bomb. And of course, there was the Manhattan Project, the ultimate expression of industrial and scientific power. This unseen arsenal ensured that American quantity was backed up by a decisive technological quality.
All of this cost money, an astronomical amount. The war cost the United States over $300 billion in 1940s money, more than all previous government spending in the nation's history combined. The national debt skyrocketed by over 500%. It was financed through a combination of higher taxes and a massive public campaign to sell war bonds, which raised nearly $186 billion from ordinary citizens. But America didn't just arm itself. Through the Lend-Lease program, it became the bankroller and supplier for the entire Allied war effort. It sent billions of dollars worth of equipment to Britain when it was on the ropes and to the Soviet Union, keeping the Eastern Front alive. The Red Army marched toward Berlin, supplied by over 400,000 American trucks, communicating with American radios and eating American spam. The U.S. didn't just outproduce its enemies, it outproduced them on behalf of its allies too. It was an economic tsunami that the Axis economies, strained to the breaking point, simply could not withstand.
So, what was the real reason America's arsenal was unstoppable? It wasn't the Sherman tank or the B-17 bomber. It was the system that produced them. It was the marriage of free market industrial genius with centralized government direction. It was the social mobility that allowed millions of women and minorities to join the workforce. It was the logistical mastery that could move a mountain of supplies across an ocean and then a continent. It was the scientific innovation that provided a crucial edge. The Axis powers, particularly Germany, saw warfare as a contest of tactical brilliance and superior machines. They never understood that America wasn't fighting that war. America was fighting a war of production, a war of logistics, a war of systems. It drowned its enemies in a tidal wave of steel, oil, and aluminum. It wasn't one weapon that was unstoppable. The entire, integrated, continental-scale war machine was unstoppable.
This mobilization changed America and the world forever. It pulled the country out of the Great Depression and set the stage for its rise as a global superpower. But it also created the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower would later warn about. The legacy is complicated. What do you think is the most overlooked aspect of America's WW II production miracle? Was it the workers, the logistics, or the technology? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.